Hey there everybody, it's Alex here from RPG Site, just with a little quick look at the Fallout 4 Automatron DLC which has just come out. Spent a fair chunk of today playing all the main story missions from start to finish, seeing pretty much everything it has to offer, so I can do a quick little video for you here going over all that stuff. So, what is there to tell you? So, I guess off the top, let's just say there won't be any hardcore spoilers in this video, so I'm not going to spoil any of the story beats of this DLC outright. I'm not going to show any of the big cutscenes. However, the gameplay footage that I might be playing might show locations that you go to, or enemies that you fight, or weapons that you might have which are new. And I will also show you a little bit of the various parts you can get for your automaton afterwards. Basically, from very early on in the DLC, you have the ability to build your own robot, or modify one that the story sort of plops in your lap. But immediately after the completion of the main story, a lot more unlocks, and that's where you really get into the meat of everything. To be honest, that seems like as good a place to start as any to talk about the robot building stuff. So basically what these robots do is they function exactly the same as any other companion that you find in the game. But the difference is you can build them and modify them. Now, modifying a robot takes place in the same sort of menu setup as modifying weapons or armor, or your power armor indeed. And basically, early on in this DLC, you'll unlock a new sort of workbench that you can plop down in any of your settlements, and that will get you the ability to build robots. You can have more than one, so you're not just limited to one. And actually interesting to note is, obviously, without skirting around spoilers, there are obviously some robot companions in vanilla Fallout 4 as well. And this actually allows you to edit those. So the one that everybody knows about, because he's right there in the opening, of course, is Codsworth, the butler robot. And so if you don't want him to be a sort of floating Mr. Handy robot, you can make him a gigantic tank, but he will still have Codsworth's personality, Codsworth's voice, and so on and so forth. So that's a fun little addition. To be honest, it's nice to be able to build these companions out. Obviously, they don't have the loyalty mechanics or the perks that regular companions have, but they seem to be able to get pretty powerful. You can build some pretty ridiculous massive robots that can then accompany you through the wasteland. You can even build some where they're not getting, it warns you, warning this won't be a very effective companion indoors or in enclosed spaces, because you can make stuff that's that big and huge. Also makes it very useful for if you need a mule to carry your stuff, because robots can obviously, you can build them out to have the maximum carrying capacity if you literally are one of those people who just uses your companion as a way of carrying all the junk you need to get back to a settlement, which is certainly something I do. So yeah, the robot building is pretty cool. I'll probably do a little separate video just showing off. I'll do a separate video, 2-3 minutes of me building one, so look on the channel for that. But I guess at this point, important now to talk about what you actually get in terms of new gameplay content. So obviously this DLC is retroactive, so that means, you know, in fact it's probably best experienced as part of the rest of Fallout 4, because I think if you were to, about halfway through the game, play this storyline and unlock these new robot companions, I think you'd probably use them quite a bit throughout the back end of the game. Whereas the DLC, for me, sort of the difficulty level was either really easy with me one-shotting enemies, or really hard, because everything was obviously matched to my level 50 or more level. But it was still great fun. Basically, it boils down to a distress signal you hear, then you go to a location, you meet a character, that character comes around with you on several little fetch quests, and that then leads you to the big new area, which is the Lair of the Mechanist, who is the main villain of this DLC. It's certainly not the most complicated of setups for a DLC. It's certainly not the most complicated side quest line in Fallout 4, but it's definitely a pretty meaty quest. If I had to guess, it probably took me somewhere between 2.5 hours to 3 hours to play it from start to finish, and then after that, it is worth noting, the game does sort of give you some additional quests that are basically, I imagine those quests will go forever, but I'm not sure, and they're sort of like the Preston go and help a settlement quests, in that somebody gives you it, and it's sort of a go to a place in the Commonwealth and deal with a particular brand of enemies, and in this instance, of course, they're all robotic. Speaking of enemies, there's some pretty cool stuff in this new one. It's all new robotic enemies, and there's a few new weapons to go along with that, and they all sort of fill in the same sort of wheelhouse that you get from Assaultrons and stuff like that, but you get a lot more bigger tank-like enemies, which there are a few of those in the main game, but not too many. And you also get some new raider types, which is a weird thing you wouldn't expect, but while the raiders themselves aren't new, and they're using the same sort of weapons and tactics they used in the main game, it's a new faction of raiders who use armor that's been cribbed from robots, so you sort of see them wearing helmets that are the heads of robots that have had the guts scooped out so they can put it on a human head and things like that, and that's a whole new type of armor that you can pick up and use on yourself. So yeah, I mean, content-wise, it's a lot of shooting. There's not too much talking. You know, there's a lot of unavoidable combat. You know, there's not many opportunities to talk your way out of things and that sort of thing. But you know, it felt like a solid story to introduce the new robot mechanics, and also offer up some stuff to go along with that. So, like I say, some new weapons, some new armor types, and a new settlement at the end of it. Which you can then use like any other settlement. It doesn't actually add anywhere new to the outside of the map. You know, I'm pretty sure that everything that is there here was there before in the main game, but what this does allow you to do is enter a few new places. But this is a more modestly sized and modestly priced DLC. Bethesda have come out and said now they have that one that is going to be a big one, like a Shivering Isles, Dragonborn sized DLC. This is not that, but this is really nice, I think, and perhaps even bordering on a must if you're planning to replay Fallout 4 anytime soon, because I think having the robot companions just gives a whole other new use for all the junk you're picking up. It makes those resources even more valuable, and it gives you a lot more choice in how you're going to play, and that's really, really nice, and I wish I'd had it going through the first time, although I can see where Bethesda was coming from, perhaps not having this in the main game, because even if they had the time to have put it in, I do think if this had been present, nobody would have used any of the main companions, many of whom are brilliant and well written and all that sort of stuff, if you'd had the ability to build these awesome robots. You know, I've built a thing that looks a little bit like a Dalek, and I'm very happy with that. So, yeah, I mean, this feels like a great little DLC. I think it's probably not the type of thing that you're going to want to go back to Fallout 4 solely. Like, you know, I obviously went back for the sake of coverage, but I think if you're somebody who's finished Fallout 4, going back just for this, it doesn't last long enough, and it doesn't add enough unless you're starting a new file to make a huge difference. However, the flip side of that, of course, is if you're planning to replay anytime soon, like I say, it should be fantastic. And if you want to wait for a little bit, you know, when there's several more DLCs out, they're probably going to add up to be a significant chunk of gameplay that then is worth sitting down and taking the additional time to play all in one go. But yeah, good fun. Really enjoyed it. It certainly feels well worth the price when you consider the original price of the season pass and you consider how much more content you'll be getting besides this. But, you know, we'll obviously, with the increased season pass price, we're going to have to wait and see how the rest of it pans out. Footage you're seeing, by the way, is from the PlayStation 3 version of the game. You know, it's still a Fallout game, so it performed well, but there was still plenty of janky stuff that happened, like there was sort of a jump scare when a gigantic robot activated right next to me, and it didn't just jump scare me, it also seemed to jump scare the game, because this robot coming to life and firing off a huge volley of rockets at me just made the game crash to the PlayStation dashboard. So yeah, it's still Fallout 4. It's still a little bit janky. It's always going to be, especially when they've just added something new. But this feels like a solid little thing that can sit on top of the main game and actually add something that's really quite worthwhile. It doesn't feel cheap. It feels like these robots utilize the systems that already existed in the game well, while offering up something that does feel quite fresh. So yeah, that's my verdict. I'll probably have a text review also on the site on rpgsite.net if you fancy reading a more in-depth opinion. And other than that, please do stick with us. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel or follow us on Twitter at rpgsite. And we'll be back with more coverage of the Fallout DLCs and all other manner of RPG stuff as it lands, as it comes out, or in some cases before it comes out. So thanks everyone, I'll see you next time.